Good evening, friends. We've got a lot of folks joining us, and we're going to get folks in and get started here in just a moment. I hope everyone is doing well today. All right, I know we're going to have some more folks joining us here, but we're going to get started because we have a wonderful special guest this evening for our Arts and Health Masterclass. And before we get started, I am Dr. Marianne East. I am the Artistic Director for Lifelong Learning and Research at Encore Creativity for Older Adults. And we are so thankful to AARP for their support so that we can offer these monthly master classes for free. And I know many of you make a donation on top of that, which is wonderful. We are recording this evening, so in about a week, Ryan should have it up on our YouTube channel if there's something that you want to go back to, or if you want to share it out with friends and family. Remember, these are open to anyone 55 and older that has internet access. So we want to spread this knowledge far and wide. So tonight we are joined by Dr. Juan Rodriguez from AARP. He is a public health researcher and leader with more than 20 years of experience translating research into public serving programs, partnerships, and policies to improve population health and and address chronic diseases. So those are things that we definitely want to hear about his work. Most recently, he served as the Chief of Health Aging Program at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And managed agency portfolios on Alzheimer's disease, arthritis, and healthy aging. And you know, at Encore, we are all about healthy aging. In this role, he worked to increase public awareness of dementia risk factors, expand communication about strategies for maintaining brain health, improve access to and availability of data, and strengthen the capacity of public health agencies and community organizations to serve aging populations. So he has a strong history of translating research findings into programs, which is what I really am interested to hear about, because that's what we want to do here at Encore, is bring all of that research into what we do every day with all of you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Rodriguez, and if you have questions, pop them in the chat. We'll pause periodically for questions as well. Okay? Enjoy. Dr. Rodriguez, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I thought today I would put together a talk that kind of talked about the science behind what we know about music, the arts, and what it does to our brains, and why it can be such a helpful tool for improving our brain health. And so that's what I prepared for today, and I hope you enjoy it. Marianne, if at any point, there's questions, please feel free to interrupt. I'm not, I'm trying to keep it casual. So feel free if there's questions that
Sure.
pop up. Um, right. So I guess I will go ahead and get started. Like Marianne said, I'm with AARP. I haven't been there too long. I'm fairly new still. I've only been there 7 or 8 months. But AARP does a wealth of stuff around brain health, and a lot of that is investing in music and the arts. So just to give you a sense of what I thought we'd talk about tonight, I thought I'd start talking a little bit about what I mean when I say brain health. What does that really mean, and what does that cover? I transitioned then to talking a little bit about why scientists study the arts, because I thought it would set the scene nicely. And then I talk about the research about what we know about music in the brain. And then what if we go to beyond music, when we think about theater, dance, and the visual arts, other arts areas? And then kind of cover like, well, what do we really know about all the science and what do we not know? Where do the gaps still exist? And then I thought I'd kind of close it all out with some practical takeaways that all of us can use regarding music and how to have that impact our brains for the positive. So what is brain health? So brain health isn't really just the absence of a disease. It's a set of actions or the things we do to protect, build, and invest in our cognitive health. Brain health is the ability of your brain to support the mental functions that allow you to live the life you want. So that includes us being able to think clearly, help us remember what matters, help us make good decisions, manage our emotions, stay engaged in relationships and activities, and maintain our independence. And these aren't just activities for older adults, it's a lifelong journey. We can take actions to strengthen our brain health at any age. Research shows that there are many things that we can do for our brain health and to help us age as healthily as possible. Now, I do want to focus on that, say that the brain is more than cognition. Brain health really is a combination of four factors kind of meeting together. A cognition plays a big part, but our physical health also plays a big part. Our emotional and mental well-being plays a big part, and our functional independence or our ability to do things in our lives to be able to be independent and live our lives independently in the way we want to also matter a lot for our brain health. At AARP, you'll hear us talk a lot about the six pillars of brain health. And these are the six things we recommend that are things you can do to kind of take charge of your brain health. The first is be social, being connected to people and avoiding getting ourselves isolated, keeping in touch with family and friends, and avoiding that social isolation. That can make a huge difference for our brains as we age. Keeping our brain engaged, we got to keep finding ways to stimulate our thinking, explore new interests and hobbies. And this can be in easy ways, and it can also be in challenging ways. Learning an instrument, learning a new language, things that take work and that take our concentration and effort, and keep our brains engaged will help our brains kind of function for longer. Managing our stress, we can try practicing relaxation, and that really just means anything that relaxes you. We can work on adopting a stable daily schedule, not overloading our schedules or to-do lists, and really thinking about and focusing on our mental health will be important for managing our stress. Ongoing exercise is important. We got to keep moving, particularly throughout the day. The goal is to target about 2.5 hours of physical activity a week. Sleep, another really important factor, and sleep can be elusive for a lot of us. I know for myself, I struggle a lot with getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. And then getting a healthy diet, choosing nutritious, heart healthy foods like fish, veggies, and fruits, really important for our brains in the long run. And then this physical health component I managed before, the health of our brains is directly tied to the health of the rest of our bodies. And that really manifests by managing common chronic conditions being a really important part of our brain health. Heart health is brain health. If we take care of our hearts, we take care of our brains. And that really means dealing with high blood pressure and high cholesterol. The reason these two factors can really impact our brains is because our blood vessels run up and around our brains. And so if blood is moving at high speeds through our brains, that can cause inflammation and damage. If we have high cholesterol, that can cause cholesterol deposits in blood vessels that run through our brains, and it can create more pressure. Diabetes also can impact inflammation in the blood vessels in our brains. Hearing loss, another really important factor. If we're dealing with hearing loss, it's important to get our hearing checked and get hearing aids if it's helpful to us. Issues that could interfere with our sleep, like sleep apnea, that's an important factor to take care of. And issues related to vision loss, also important to take care of because these chronic diseases or these chronic issues that we suffer with, particularly as we get older, you see the prevalence of these or how common these are really increase a lot. Addressing these and dealing with these can really help our brains as we age. So, what is normal brain aging? Not all changes to our brain functions are cause for concern, and knowing the difference is important. There are typical and expected changes in our brains with normal aging. We may process information somewhat more slowly than we did in our younger years. It may take us a little longer to remember a name or a word or pull up a memory, but eventually we get there. Needing more time to learn something new, so it might take us a few more tries at things. We might need to read things a couple more times in order to really grasp it or understand it. And we can have occasional difficulty with multitasking. All that is normal as we age. These changes are gradual, they're mild, and they don't necessarily significantly interfere with our daily lives. But where is there cause for concern? These are the things that are not a normal part of aging and are probably worth discussing with a healthcare provider. If we have persistent or significant memory loss that affects our daily lives, if people are getting lost in familiar places or doing familiar routines or during familiar routines, if there's difficulty managing medications, issues with finances, or household tasks that used to be manageable but no longer are, that might be a cause for concern and something to talk to a doctor about. If you're seeing significant changes in personality or in judgment or behavior, if there's confusion about time or place or people, and if there's difficulty following conversations or finding words frequently. Now, if there is one of these issues, it doesn't necessarily mean a person has dementia. It could be also, there's all sorts of factors that could be impacting cognition. It could be a side effect of medication. It could be a side effect of, of an infectious disease. There's all sorts of things that could cause different cognition issues that aren't necessarily dementia. But it's worth, if they're getting to the point, if symptoms are getting to the point where they're interfering with your ability to lead your daily life, they might be worth talking to a healthcare provider in order to distinguish between something that might just be an episodic thing or a symptom and something that might need further consideration or further clinical workup. I also want to emphasize that dementia is not an inevitability. It's estimated that up to 45% of cases of dementia may be attributable to modifiable risk factors. And all that really means is that about 45% of cases of dementia may be preventable. And the factors I just talked to you about are the ways we can potentially prevent dementia. How we live our lives has a potential to impact our risk of developing dementia. That's how we manage our health and how we develop our healthy habits, including creative engagement. Prevention and making healthy choices won't guarantee that we'll never develop dementia, but they can reduce our risk and help provide us better longer term health. So, why do we study the impact of the arts on health? And there's two big reasons. The first is every culture on the globe makes music, creates art, tells stories, dances, or performs in some way. It's one of the things that connects us all as humans, right? And the other thing is the arts engage the whole person. When we're engaging in music or engaging in theater or something along those lines, it drives our thinking gets involved, our emotions get involved, our creativity is involved, we're moving, we're communicating, and we're forming relationships because these are usually shared interests that you don't necessarily do all by yourself. So researchers became interested because there are so few activities that combine all these things: learning, memory, attention, social interaction, emotional expression, all at the same time. There's a lot of activities that do a few of these, but there's few that do all of them simultaneously. And researchers have observed that music can trigger memories. Dance very effectively combines physical and cognitive activity. Things like choirs create social bonds, artistic participation promotes well-being, and there's so many studies that have shown that when we can combine several factors that can help with our brain health together simultaneously, it can really have an effect on decreasing our risk for developing dementia later in life. So let's talk a little bit about music in the brain. So, why is music so special? Music is unique because it simultaneously engages more regions of the brain than virtually any other activity while being safe, enjoyable, and accessible to virtually everyone, regardless of age or ability. Like I was saying, music engages our hearing, it engages our memory, it taps into our emotions, it helps us express ourselves with different language. We have to focus if we're performing, so it requires our attention and it requires some movement. Now, music, as I've said, is a whole brain activity. And so our brain is broken up into four lobes: a frontal lobe, which is right here in the front. That's the part of our brain that does the thinking, the planning, the emotional regulation. When you listen to music, your frontal lobe is working hard on predicting what comes next. So our brains are hardwired to anticipate the next melody or the next beat. It helps with processing emotional responses and making judgments like, I like this, or this makes me feel tense, or this makes me feel uncomfortable. All that happens in the frontal lobe, and music makes all that happen. The temporal lobes, which are kind of here closer to the sides, lower sides of the brain, right above your ears. That's a temporal lobe. That is a part of the brain responsible for hearing and memory. This is the most directly involved lobe. Obviously, for music, we need to be able to hear it. So our auditory cortex, which is where sound is where our brain works on sound, it decodes pitch. It helps us with rhythm, timbre, and melody. And it also connects sound to memory. And this is why a song can instantly take you back to a specific moment in time, or why it can make a memory appear so visibly, because our brain or that temporal lobe is connecting music to a memory, almost like giving you like a soundtrack to your life, right? Musical memory is extremely durable. The temporal lobe regions appear more resistant to disease than other parts of the brain that store other memories, which is why often you hear about dementia patients listening to music and all of a sudden being able to remember lyrics or giving them memories that previously they might not have been able to talk about, or they might have been having memory issues that day, or they might not be able to recognize people. But all of a sudden, when music gets involved, you see them be able to remember, and it's because that musical memory is so much more durable. The parietal lobe, which is kind of like where the top of our head sit, like the crown of your head, that's where spatial awareness and sensory integration happens in the brain. The parietal lobe integrates what you're hearing with your body's position and movement. It's the part of your brain that helps you instinctively know where the beat is. And it's what allows you to clap along, and why music and dance feel so naturally connected, because the parietal lobe kind of processes that sound and helps you understand how to move your body given the sound. It can also help you track multiple instruments or voices at once by organizing sound in space. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. And then the occipital lobe, that's the bottom part of the brain, kind of in the back of the head. That is where vision is concentrated. And even without a visual performance to watch, music activates our occipital lobe, because listening to music often triggers very vivid mental imagery. When you're watching a live performance or a music video, the visual and auditory information merge here in the occipital lobe, and connecting regions, and that helps deepen emotional impact of music, which is why sometimes if you watch a live performance, it can feel much more emotional or much more real than if you just listen to it. um and so the simultaneous coordination of all this, music activates all these four lobes simultaneously and in coordination. It doesn't do it one thing at a time, so it does it all at once. And so music really pushes our brains to work hard. And then you add in the brainstem, which regulates heart rate and breathing in response to rhythm, and the limbic system, which is or our emotional center. And you have all the parts of the brain really engaged. Researchers have noted that it's hard to name another everyday activity that achieves that level of whole brain engagement in real time. And that's because we're not just listening. When music is playing, there's a lot happening. One of the big things happening is pattern recognition. When you listen to music, your brain starts to predict what it's going to hear next. When the brain confirms that prediction, it rewards you. But if you're wrong, particularly in a pleasant way, you get an even bigger reward. And that's why key changes are so popular in songs because they make the music unpredictable, and what's what makes listening to songs that have key changes in them, so particularly at like a big 11 o'clock number or something like that, why it makes the music so enjoyable, because that key change gives your brain a reward. It also helps. It also, you're doing a lot of melodic expectation. While rhythms tend to energize and synchronize, melody conveys emotion. A melody can feel sad because it can sound like crying, or because you heard it at a funeral. So it's both playing with the sound and playing with the emotional connection you might have to a particular song. And then there's also rhythmic processing. Our motor systems activate when you listen to rhythm, even when you're sitting perfectly still. Our brain starts to sync with external beats. And that's why sometimes it can be so hard not to tap your foot or clap along when you hear a particular beat. And our brains are also doing multi-track processing, which means when we listen to music with multiple instruments or voices, that auditory cortex in our temporal lobe starts pulling apart those overlapping sounds. And it helps you distinguish between the sound a guitar makes, the sound a bass makes, and then a voice. Even though they all arrive at our eardrum at the same time, our brains are able to pull them apart and listen to them distinctively. Music and memory. Now, music can trigger multiple parts of your memory system. Music triggers our semantic memory, and that's facts and knowledge. So you'll hear a song and you can remember the name of the song, the name of a singer, the name of the album, or it might trigger episodic memory. So that's a personal autobiographical event, like where you were when you first heard it. And music we've listened to between the ages of 10 to 25 can particularly trigger that episodic memory. There's, for some reason, excuse me, that time span from 10 to 25, those ages, the music of that time kind of can define your taste in music and what you enjoy listening to, and can really tie to memory. So particularly if you're in a caregiving role for someone, or if you have a younger relative or an elderly relative, knowing or understanding the music they listen to between 10 and 25 can really help you understand what's the kind of music they're best going to respond to. This is particularly important for people who are caregiving for people with dementia, that understanding the music they listen to in that time is one of the things that will really key you into the kind of music that can trigger those moments where they can have reflection or memories of the events that music had in their life. Then we have procedural memory. Those are our motor skills and our habits. And so this is like a musician remembering how to play a song after many years of not playing it, or if you remember a specific dance or that went along with a song. And our emotional memory, I mean, I think everyone's experienced a song that can make you feel something even before you consciously remember why. And that's because music encodes not just events, but emotional states, relationships, or older versions of ourselves. Now, music and mood is one of the best supported areas in this entire field. Music accesses the emotional brain through of several pathways simultaneously, and crucially, it does so faster than conscious thought. So before you even think it, your brain has already processed music and what it might mean for your mood. And this is why music can make you feel something before you've even decided how you feel about it. Like you hear like a violin, and it can evoke that kind of sadness, or that kind of cry sound from that a violin can make. And it can happen really quickly before you've even really kind of made realized it was happening. And this happens for three reasons. Um, Personal and cultural memory link specific music to specific emotional contexts, and that makes the emotional response almost reflective for your brain. So if you listen to a lot of sad music at a particular point in life, or you come from a culture where there's some of the like traditional music is has a particular sound or has a particular beat or particular rhythm, and you listen to it, it can give you a feeling of nostalgia almost immediately without you even really realize what's happening because your brain links that sound or that type of sound with this memory or with this experience. The rhythm and tempo of music also can directly influence your heart rate, your breathing rate, and your muscle tension, which then feed back into the emotional experience, right? And music can also mirror our vocalizations. Fast-paced rhythmic music can resemble joyful, giddy, excited speech, while more slow, low, and minor key music can resemble the voice of someone that is sad or grieving. There's lots of studies that have shown that music can improve our moods. Listening to music you enjoy reliably improves moods across a wide range of studies, populations, and contexts. Intentional, focused listening produces stronger mood effects than background music. The more attention and emotional engagement you bring to the music, the more your mood system responds. Multiple studies have found that listening to relaxing music before or during stressful situations can reduce our cortisol levels. Cortisol is like the body's stress hormone, right? Compared to silence or other interventions or things that have been tried. And social anxiety specifically responds well to group music making. So if you're ever feeling socially anxious, being in a group setting where music is being made will increase your feelings of safety and trust in a group, which is why choirs, theater groups all tend to have such close, trusting relationships with each other because the act of engaging in music together brings down social anxiety. Music and sleep. Music has also been shown to improve our sleep. It reduces the physiological, arousal that interferes with sleep onset. So music can help lower our blood pressure, lower our heart rate, and get us ready to go to bed. It can also address cognitive components of insomnia. So if you've ever had trouble going to bed because you're racing through all these thoughts of what you got to try to get done tomorrow and everything you didn't get done today, or you're ruminating on something that's got you worried or anxious, that can tend to keep us awake and give us a bout of insomnia. And music can help address some of that. But here, tempo at selection matters significantly. You just can't listen to any music to help you go to sleep. You got to go for slow music, 60 to 80 beats per minute, tend to be most effective for sleep. And that roughly matches or is slightly below a resting heart rate. So it brings you down a little bit. It'll start to bring down your blood pressure, bring down anxiety, and that'll bring down that kind of racing thought and rumination. Studies have shown that familiar and personally meaningful music will work better than if you just put on kind of I'm sure you've all heard like relaxing music or the spa music or meditation music. If the music you play is familiar or personally more meaningful and is in that 60 to 80 beats per minute, it'll be a lot more effective than just kind of generic relaxing music. On the flip side, music can also be extremely helpful for exercise. Our perceived exertion, or how hard exercise feels, is reliably reduced by music. So people consistently rate the same physical workload as feeling easier when they're listening to music than when they're doing it in silence. The tempo and rhythm of a song provide an external pacing mechanism that many people find easier to maintain than if they're just internally pacing. And so when people synchronize their movements to music, like running to a particular beat, their movement becomes more efficient and it requires less oxygen for the same amount of output so they don't get tired as quickly. You'll see a lot of professional runners always running with headphones on, and they very carefully pick their songs for their playlist while they're running or while they're doing a particular exercise. And that is because they try to have songs that stay at a particular beat per minute that's slightly more elevated than normal so that it can help them pace themselves when they're running a long race. Building your brain's resilience. So, cognitive reserve is our brain's ability to adapt and keep functioning, even as it experiences age related changes. Think of it like a savings account. Every brain healthy choice you make is like a deposit. Um, and so, the more you've built up over your lifetime, the more resilience your brain has. A brain with more cognitive reserve can cope better with the changes and challenges that come along with aging. So, what builds cognitive reserve? Education and lifelong learning. The longer we're learning and the more we're learning and trying new things, the more reserve we're going to build. If we do mentally stimulating activities, watching TV, not the most mentally stimulating activities, but learning new things, trying new things, having ourselves challenged can really build a lot of cognitive reserve. Being physically active and connecting with other people, spending quality time with other people builds cognitive reserve. Music can also build cognitive reserve because it requires attention. You got to practice. You got to learn music. You might have to, some songs are much harder to learn than others. You got to memorize and you got to coordinate, particularly if you're singing in a choir. Music can drive lifelong learning. You can learn a new instrument, you can learn new songs, or you can learn how to read music. You can explore unfamiliar music. You can learn to sing harmonies, or you can learn to sing as part of a choir. So, obviously, that's very different from singing by yourself. So, music can be one of the tools for lifelong learning and for cognitively engaging and stimulating activities. Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to rewire itself in response to experience. And music is such a rich stimulant for neuroplasticity. Long-term musical experience can change how our brain processes sound and the kind of motor control regions of our brain. Even short-term piano practice can increase brain activity in beginners. And this can be true for adults of all ages. It is never too late to get engaged with music and try to keep kind of upping that engagement. Like you might start small with like singing, but over time you can move to learning to read music, learning new songs, learning an instrument, learning more complicated music, learning harmonies, etc. All right. But what if we go beyond music? What do we know about the research out there on theater, dance, and the visual arts? Theater in the brain. So, theater involves memory and executive functioning. If you're participating in theater or being acting in a musical or a play, you got to memorize lines, choreography, blocking, and cues. This is much more than just memorizing a list of words. That's going to require repetition. That's going to require a lot of emotional association, right? Because to act, you got to convey that emotion and a lot of physical movement all at the same time. And also, it's moment to moment improv. When something goes wrong, you got to draw heavily on that working memory, on that cognitive flexibility and your attention and control. Emotional regulation and physical embodiment. Actors got to express a genuine emotion on cue, sustain it for long periods, and then disengage afterwards. So theater involves a lot of that voice work, a lot of breath, posture, gesture, and movement. But being an audience member is also more cognitively active than it might appear. It requires sustained and switching attention. We got to track emotions. We got to track the plot. So we got to stay engaged and paying attention. Research suggests that following complex stories exercises the brain's capacity for reasoning, inference, and modeling. This is particularly true in musicals because there's so much happening. Years ago, I saw an interview that the composer Stephen Sondheim did where he talked about the labor the audience has got to do when they're watching a musical. And he's credited with how he wrote his lyrics, that he tried to write simple lyrics, which I don't know how successful he was if you've ever seen a Sondheim show about lyrics being simple, but that he tried to write simple lyrics because the audience had to take in the story, the lights, the costumes, the set, the actors, all these other factors, and then listen to the words and try to decipher the words. And so that they were already doing all this work watching the show, that he wanted to try to give them a break on the lyrics. And like I said, not sure how successful he was in the scheme of things, but that always comes to mind for me when I think about how it being an audience member also requires more of your cognitive activity than you might think. And I think we also can't ignore that there's a social dimension to watching theater. You're all in a room together experiencing this thing at the same time. That closely bonds people that are watching the production, but it also bonds audience members. It gives you something to discuss, something to relate to, something to react to, and especially from this kind of communal experience. Dance is also very important for brain health. Dance is one of the most cognitively demanding activities that a person can do. It's mental and physical, which is at high intensity for both. A lot of activities are either mental activities with a physical component or a physical activity with a mental component. Dance is both at all times. When you're dancing, you're processing music and rhythm in real time, and then your brain is trying to translate all that sound information into input for motor output. So you got to move, and you got to move a certain way at certain beats at certain times. If it's a choreographed dance, you got to hold that sequence in your memory and in your muscles. You got to monitor your own body position in space. If you're dancing with someone else, you got to coordinate with a partner or with an ensemble, and you're potentially making split-second improvisational decisions. It combines a physical component, a cognitive component, and a social component. This is what we call a dual task demand. One of the most cognitively interesting aspects of dance is what researchers call the dual task demand, and that's the requirement to perform multiple cognitively demanding tasks simultaneously. Think walking and talking, for example. That becomes a lot harder to do with age, and is even if you struggle with walking and talking simultaneously, if it's gotten harder as you've aged, that's a clinical marker that you might be at higher risk of falling and of cognitive decline. Dance is essentially intensive dual task training. You must simultaneously process music, execute movement sequences, navigate space, monitor your partner, and make real-time adjustments. Dance has been shown to improve balance, provide cardiovascular benefits, and improve flexibility and muscle strength. There's even studies, particularly in patients with Parkinson's, that have shown that dancing tango can be really beneficial for Parkinson's patients. And that is because there's something about the needing to do particular physical movements with particular beats and changes in music that kind of help bypass some of the disease related issues. So oftentimes at YMCA's or at other nonprofits, you might see tango for people living with Parkinson's because it can be very helpful to the Parkinson's patients. There's several studies that have shown it. And then the visual arts and brain health. Viewing art is a lot less demanding than making it, but it's still not passive in the way casually looking at something is. We're processing something complex. If you're looking at a painting and you really pay attention to the painting and you try to think about, well, how is it made? What are the colors here? How are they blended? What are the brush strokes? Are there other effects or styles the artist use in order to make this? If you really think about it, that's engaging in a very cognitively complex activity. And then to take it to a step further, a lot of people look at art and think, well, does it imply or does it suggest a story or a narrative? These two, there's two people in a painting. Are they happy? Are they sad? Where are they? What do I think about what they're thinking, or how do I reacting to what they're looking at, or to what I think that painting is saying? And a lot of paintings can elicit an emotional response from people. And all that comes together to create a cognitively complex interaction. There's even something that scientists call the museum effect. And the museum effect is a growing body of research on the cognitive and emotional benefits of spending time in art museums. Studies have found that museum visits can reduce stress, they can improve mood, they can increase physical activity, they can increase feelings of social connection, even if you're at the museum by yourself, but you're in community, you're in public, you're around other people, you might strike up a conversation with someone looking at something similar, and it can produce a state of positive cognitive engagement that can persist beyond the visit itself. There's lots of museum programs for people with dementia that have reported that some become more verbally expressive at the museum when engaging with art, particularly if it's art that is meaningful to them or that they have engaged with at some point in the past. It can become more emotionally animated. They can become more socially engaged when presented with compelling visual art. Now, painting, drawing, or sculpting also requires significant attention. So while observing art is good, making art is even more intensive for our brains because in order to make art, it's slow, it's sustained, it's detail oriented, and it's non-fragmented focus on a single object you're seeing. Meaning, we got to focus on a piece of this, and then it'll continue to expand and grow and grow and grow. We can build cognitive reserve through that visual processing, through our memory, the motor control that you need in order to do slight brush strokes or in order to embroider or in order to cross stitch. That's fine motor control because we're making small movements, right? And then we also got to plan your brain, if even if you're doing something like making a quilt, that can be a visual art, but you got to plan your stitch, you got to plan what the quilt is going to look like, and then you build it in pieces. That takes planning, and it also takes some emotional regulation. That brush control, pencil pressure, the hand-eye coordination, those are all demanding motor skills that require significant neural or brain resources and continue to develop with practice well into older age. Creating a visual artwork involves holding an intention in mind while executing it across many individual decisions and actions. And so I can't talk to Encore and not talk about why choirs matter. Singing in a choir simultaneously is going to engage your memory, your language processing, your auditory discrimination. And that's auditory discrimination is your ability to differentiate particular sounds. So that's your ability to be able to, like, if you're singing the alto part, be able to know what the soprano is doing or what a tenor is doing, what the basses or baritones are doing, right? And then it also requires fine motor control of breath, voice, and social attunement because you're doing this in a group of people. You got to figure out socially how this is all going to work, how everyone sings their parts, not to be disruptive, not to be, and how to be a part of the whole, right? For older adults, especially who face epidemic rates of loneliness, a weekly rehearsal provides structured, purposeful social contact with neurochemical reinforcements that make it genuinely restorative rather than just pleasant. The regions of the brain that store familiar songs are more resistant to decline than those that are handling other types of memory. So then that all that really means is that a lifelong practice of being in a chorus can be building memory traces that can outlast cognitive decline. So wrapping it up a little bit about what we know and what we don't know about what the research says about music and the arts and brain health. So, what do we know? We know that music can have a significant positive effect on the brain, on our mood, our ability to sleep, our memory, and other common aspects of our lives that we deal with on the daily. Engagement in the arts can really improve our well-being and our quality of life in several different ways. We don't necessarily need to make the art in order to get the benefits, but if you do engage in that creative process of making music or performing or doing theater or making visual art or dancing, you get even more benefits. And these engagements can drive social connections. And I can't stress how important avoiding being isolated is for our health. Adults who get isolated and who feel lonely and alone, their health deteriorates at incredible rates. And so having that connection to other people is incredibly important. Now, what we don't know, there are still a lot of questions researchers are trying to figure out when it comes to the arts and our health. One of the big questions is what researchers would call dosing. So trying to figure out what is the right amount of music engagement, of making art, of dancing that you need to do in order to get the benefit, right? So how much should you do? Is one music rehearsal that's an hour long a week enough, or do you need to do more? How long should I do it? If I do it for a year, is that good? Does that benefit preserve after I've stopped? Or is this something I need to continue doing? Right. Um, and then really thinking about what are the long-term effects music and the arts have on our brains and on our health. We've seen a lot of studies that show, I'm sure you've heard these before, that children who learn an instrument or who engage in music end up being better at math. And so we have some of those long-term studies of the impacts of music and music education in childhood, but that's because those happened at school and it's formalized instruction that was standardized in the system. So it was easier to measure and understand. But when people just do it for enjoyment or as a hobby, it's harder to kind of trace or study the long-term effects of that. And so that's something else that researchers are trying to work on and understand. And then we're also trying to figure out which activities work best for whom. If you've played music your entire life, it's not going to hurt you if you stop if you keep doing it, but your brain is used to that. So do you need to try something different in adulthood or older adulthood in order to keep your brain engaged in learning new things? Or is music dynamic enough that as long as you're learning new pieces, you're learning new techniques, even with an instrument you've played your whole life, is that enough to keep the brain engaged and benefit brain health? So we're still trying to work some of those things out. There's lots of studies that are working in communities to try to answer some of these questions. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll have more answers for all of this. So some practical takeaways I can leave you with based on where the research on music, the arts, and brain health lie. Incorporate music into your life. I may be preaching to the choir here, so to speak, but music can improve your well-being, especially when shared with loved ones, particularly intergenerationally. If grandparents are sharing the music of their youth with their grandkids and grandkids are sharing the music they're listening to with their grandparents, that can particularly drive well-being, social connection, memory, sharing music that way with loved ones. Dance, sing, or move to music. These activities not only provide physical exercise, but can also relieve stress and create social connection. Listen to music to encourage yourself to exercise. Music can provide a mental boost and help motivate you to move your body. Listen to familiar music that comforts you and evokes positive memories. Also, try listening to new music to stimulate your brain with unfamiliar melodies, especially since listening to music has moved so electronic, where we listen to music we make playlists on apps and all the music is streamed online versus owning physical copies of albums or CDs. This is a great way to also engage younger generations as we listen to music together because they can help us make playlists or make collections of songs that we loved when we were younger or that we love currently. And then they can also share theirs with us. Make music yourself. Music making can include singing, playing an instrument. Singing's the simplest way to get started, but it can also put you on a path to learning an instrument. Listen to familiar music that comforts you and I think I already read this, but evokes music that evokes positive memories with family and friends. Talk about that, share those memories with others. Talking about shared moments can always evoke lots of positive mental well-being. And finally, Don't delay getting your hearing checked if you notice hearing difficulties. Correcting hearing loss as soon as possible is important for your brain and to your continued enjoyment of music, and your brain will thank you for it. Addressing hearing loss is so important. People who have hearing loss that don't address it are more likely to socially isolate themselves, are more likely to have high levels of depression, and they're more likely to deteriorate in terms of health over time pretty quickly. So if you're suffering from hearing loss, talk to your doctor. It's worth getting your hearing checked out. And looking into hearing aids could change your life. It could keep you engaged in ways that you might not without them. And thank you so much. That's the what I have for my presentation, but I am happy to answer as many questions as folks may have and to continue talking about our brain health. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. So I just want to go through the chat real quick. I see some
Yeah,
hands raised as well. One question that came quite a bit was, would we be able to get a copy of the slides?
of course. Yeah, I can send them
Okay,
to you,
wonderful.
Marianne, and you can get them to folks however that
Okay,
works.
fantastic. I think that came up quite a bit.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
there was also a question about, oh, somebody mentioned when you were talking about listening to music to try to sleep.
Yeah.
And saying that familiar music was more helpful. Cindy said, but if I listen to music and I know the music, I end up singing along and not falling asleep, which I completely understand. I like having music on to work, but it can't be anything with lyrics because I'll end up
Yes.
singing
Yeah,
along
yeah,
or
yeah.
typing lyrics or something.
We'll all have personal preferences with some
Yep,
of this stuff because it's all our brains are wired just slightly differently. And so if you're a person that like will start singing, then like maybe lean instrumental.
yep,
And if it's a familiar instrumental song, then that all the better.
yeah.
But you do the best with what you got.
Yeah. Lori asks, what are the differences in the brain when playing versus performing music, or sorry, playing or performing versus just listening?
Well, it's the when you're performing or playing, it's a lot more technical
Yep.
and it requires a lot more. There's a skill that's required there, right? And
Yeah.
so it's while you still get benefit from being an audience member and engaging with the music and the emotion that can drive and the memory that can drive and such, it's like a supersized effect when you're actually the person performing or playing because that took practice, that took work ethic, that
Hmm.
took memorization, that took collaboration with others, and
Hmm.
so it's like turning the dial way up.
Yeah. There are also great YouTube recordings. I know they were promoted through the Sound Health Network, which unfortunately is not with us any longer, but I think the videos are still out on YouTube of Esperanza Spalding, who is a jazz cellist.
Hmm.
And they put her in an fMRI while she played to really see all the parts of the brain that
Yeah,
light up with the playing to kind of illustrate that here's what the brain looks like when you're just listening, but here's what it looks like when you're playing. So
yeah.
there's some cool visuals for that. Um, let's see, we've got another couple of things going in. Lots of thank yous, lots of praise, and um, yes, Dorothy, when we sang Temporal, our brains were certainly growing stronger. That was one of our challenge pieces this for chorale this last semester. We had to learn it in Spanish. Um,
Oh,
and
my
it was
people's language. Yeah,
quite
yeah.
rhythmically challenging as well. So absolutely, absolutely. John, I see you've got a hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you for the clarity of your explanation. My understanding is paper thin, so I've been trying to analogize so I can further understand it.
Yeah.
And if I'm hearing it correctly, neuroplasticity is a rerouting. And I
Yes.
analogize that to being in a car with a GPS, and the GPS will tell me if there's been a mudslide or a water main break or a fallen, and it gives you a new route.
Yeah.
But when I hear the little I understand about the role of, say, plaque in the brain, is plaque what causes those obstacles? And by engaging in music and increasing our neuroplasticity, are we defeating or simply circumventing the effects of plaque? That
So
there's no scientific basis, but it's just where my mind goes with that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know that we have like a firm that there's not a firm answer I can give you. The research is still out on this, but I think of this as plaque, the that kind of amyloid plaque that can build up that is associated with Alzheimer's. It can it it can interfere with the regular routes our our like brain might take to send information around and to process things. And so neuroplasticity then creates new paths and avenues. And so this is similar to what might happen if you have a traumatic brain injury. For example, you hit your head really hard, you have some sort of traumatic brain injury. That neuroplasticity is your brain figuring out new routes and new ways to still do what it used to do, just with a different process. And so music has been shown, and engaging in creative arts and performing arts has shown to be able to help people create those new tracks and those new avenues to kind of keep the brain working and doing things. And sometimes, just with aging, like our neurons don't fire the way they did in our 20s when we're in our 60s and 70s. That is just a normal process of aging. And that's why kind of cognitive reserve and doing this lifelong learning and lifelong engagement is so important, because those are the things that kind of keep our brains as plastic as possible, meaning that they keep creating these new paths and these new avenues.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, I'm trying to see if the videos are still up of Esperanza, and I don't know, but I will look. And yes, they also did similarly with Renee Fleming as well.
Yeah, I've
They
heard of
put
this.
her
Yeah, I think they
in, yes, while she was singing. And there's nothing like singing high C's in a tube that's
did it
like
too.
this big. Yes. Shirley was asking, is anyone familiar with Waking the Spirit by Andrew Schulman, where music therapy is used in critical care? I do not know about that. Shirley, do you have anything to share more on that?
It's an excellent book, and it definitely, as mentioned, music affects heart rate,
Yeah.
respiratory rate, but it penetrates comas, which it did for this particular author.
Mm.
And the types of music, as indicated before, is essential to identify. And you can see by the patient's response, it's used in intensive care. um, they become more agitated, reflective brain and so forth, or breathing, or they calm down and there's a point. But it literally, he attributes his wife selecting, and Bach seems to be the favorite, and most effective for many individuals in a critical state. And I just, if you love music, to see the documentation and the research that's being done in that area is just gratifying. And I just hope other intensive cares will embrace the concept.
That's a great point to bring up. Oh, there's a lot of research out there that's being done in hospitals, um, on the impacts music can have, particularly in ERs, critical care units, and even pre-surgeries, to help calm people down and reduce anxieties. And so there are some hospitals where you're seeing, if you're like in the the kind of the weird waiting room you're in before you go to an OR, where they'll be playing music in order to try to help people kind of relax, or they'll give you headphones so that you can listen to music before you go into the operating hall, and they're piping music into ERs and into ICUs in order to try to help um, people kind of reduce anxiety and help calm people down, particularly when they were in traumatic scenarios. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of research on this, and it's one of the biggest growing kind of areas in music therapy is this, like, how do we help patients kind of manage emotions and manage mood in critical care scenarios, for sure.
Thank you, Shirley. Yeah, I put a couple of links in the chat. One is to the Sound Health Network YouTube channel. There are tons and tons of videos up there, and especially over COVID.
Yeah,
They
they make
did
great
a
stuff.
whole series, I think it was like Tuesday afternoon or something, where they had all kinds of experts come in. And then the one below that that says Jazz Creativity in the Brain, that's the one with Esperanza Spalding
Oh, cool.
on there. So, but there's tons of things on the Sound Health Network YouTube. Yay, that part's still there. Nobody has taken that down yet.
That, yeah.
Wonderful.
You,
Are there any other questions for Juan?
I thought Allison's question was a good one about how earworms work.
oh,
Oh, there it
yes.
is. Yes. Yes, I know I always end up whatever the last thing we rehearsed is what follows me the rest of the day. Yes.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, this falls into that category of the brain doing something before you even realize it's doing it. And it could be a song you don't even like, and it's just stuck in there because the brain latched onto it, and there's something about the rhythm or the beat or there's something to it that, like, is just sticky for the brain, and it'll just kind of play it on a loop. And there's not a ton of research that we have that, like, explains exactly how the brain does it, but we just know it does it, and the kind of the parts involved, and unfortunately there's also no research on how to make it stop, um, until you get the new thing stuck in there. It's just something that's going to be around, but there's a great scene in the movie, oh my gosh, what's that movie called, Easy A, where someone gets a birthday card that plays a particular song, and the lead in the movie is like, oh, this song is so annoying, and then, like, you're constantly seeing them sing it throughout the movie until there's like the big music montage at the end because it's just stuck. You might not even like it, but there it is.
Yeah. Angelika, you have a question.
Yes. So I like how Juan mentioned the intergenerational interaction with music, just because I'm a bit younger here, and I also understand that Encore is kind of an organization that gives like older adults the opportunity to participate in a choir. So I was wondering if this is something that can be extended to kind of schools with choirs to have like younger kids and adolescents interact with older adults in a choir, having them come out to nursery homes to extend this impact, just to reach out to more people, especially like those who might be affected with dementia and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So let me make sure I understand the question. So would Encore consider partnering with schools? Is that what you're asking, or are you asking from the AARP standpoint?
Well, I guess to Encore, because I'm going into my senior year of high school, so I was just like thinking, um, if that was if there's anything like that, any initiatives, or if that's something that you guys would consider. Just because I know there's like so many schools throughout the country, and like having kids kind of might like kind of branch out the impact more, and also have the intergenerational effect mentioned.
Absolutely. It is not something we have done yet. And I always say yet because if there is a partnership opportunity, we would love to chat more. I'm going to put my email address in the chat for you, and feel free to reach out and we can chat a little bit more about that. Absolutely.
Oh, sure. Okay, thank you.
And we have the longest name, encorecreativity.org. I have to make sure I spell it right. Um, Let me see. Music and Memory has been working with cognitive and physical conditions. Yes,
Mhm.
with the playlist. That's a huge program.
Yeah.
Dan Cohen, who heads that up, is on our research committee, and it's an amazing, amazing program, especially for rural communities that may not have access to bring in musicians or that kind of thing. That is a huge opportunity. And it's something that, the concept behind music and memory is a personalized playlist. And
Yeah.
so the great thing is that, when it started, it was giving out the little iPod Nanos, if you all remember those. They
Yeah.
were these little tiny things that you could clip on your lapel, and you had to load the music on it, right? And now we've come to the point where I can go to, Amazon Music or Apple Music or whatever my preferred platform is, and I can create a playlist. So I have playlists for exercise, I have playlists for washing the dishes, and, things like that, depending on what kind of music I need. So that's really the concept there is familiar music that will help to motivate and engage the individual.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a terrific one. Oh, and somebody was mentioning with the earworm, Small World Ride. Yes.
But
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, would you say something about church choirs? They have a special function. Sally would like to know.
I would completely agree. I think church choirs have a very special function, and they're really a way to bring music to a community, in a big way. And they're such a strong tradition, usually with church choirs. So there's a lot of familiarity with music. A lot of that music invokes meditation and a lot of like reflection and thought, which is wonderful for your brain. So it ties in all these additional aspects, and it's one of the things that I think churches, like one of the strong things that makes them such a partner for brain health work, that makes faith communities like and such a strong partner for brain health work, in that music is such an inherent function of most religious services, that there's like you can bring the community in with music, and like especially if it's a kind of choir that like you don't have to know what you're doing when you start, that they're happy to like bring you in just because you want to learn or you want to get involved or you enjoy it so much. But there's so many benefits to choirs at churches, because they do bring this like reflection. They bring a lot of like history with the music they perform, and it's done in community, so they're incredibly important and can do so much for people.
Hmm.
I mean,
Right.
you meet a lot of people who say that the main reason they go to church is the choir or like the music component of the service. So it's extremely important.
Yes, I would agree because I'm also a church musician, and it's another form of worship. It's another way, just as any music or art is another form of expression.
Yeah.
That's certainly, and I think, it's not, and it's not a performance, right? There's a
Right.
it's not the same as giving a concert,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah. Yeah.
also a little bit different and brings in that spiritual aspect of our being.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. It's a different part of the body in a way. Like
Yes.
it's difficult to explain, but it's like a different part of you engaged, and a
Yes.
different, you're expressing something different.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. A couple people are asking about recording. So, just another reminder that all of our recordings now go up on our YouTube page. Give Ryan about a week to edit and get them up on YouTube, but they will be there. You can get our artistic and our health and research master classes up there that you can revisit anytime. Yep. Great. We've got more accolades. Thank you. And I hope that you all are taking advantage of all the resources that AARP has, not just the brain health, but all of the resources they have. They have a great tech division if you want help with technology and things like that. There's all sorts of classes and learning that they have as well. So please take advantage of that because we're very grateful for their support of our programming, but we also want to turn around and say, hey, there's so much that they do as well. So please do check that out. And you can find those 6 pillars of brain health on their webpage if you want kind of a quick refresher or a little image to remind you of what those are.
Yeah, if you just Google AARP brain health, you'll find us.
Yep. Yes, and Jan brings up Dr. Michael Tout's book on neurologic musicotherapy. That's a whole that's a whole nother masterclass that we'll dive into. But there is so much work out there. There is. Are there any other questions? Peggy, you can get to the YouTube channel from our Encore page. If you go to the Masterclass page, at the very bottom, there's a link to our YouTube channel. You can find it all there. All right. Well, thank you so much, Juan, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled I could join you.
Yes, and we'll have to have you back sometime to talk about what's new on the horizon. I know we've been talking about how we at Encore can contribute to some of this research, especially thinking in the terms of dosage and all the different parts of Encore that folks are invested in and participate in, and that longevity, because we have some folks that have been with us since the beginning. So we're coming up on 20 years, and we really want to look at that as well. So we hope that we can contribute to that literature as well.
Awesome.
All right,
All
and
right, y'all.
thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Join us next Wednesday. Will be Global Rhythms with Tom Teasley. So if you have a bucket or a box or a drum or anything that you can come and do some rhythm with us on the 24th of June. So we'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Night.